Welcome to another episode of NeverEndingPanel.com. I'm your host and moderator, Donnie Collin. To the left of me is flamboyant expert extraordinaire, Michelle Pincus. To the left of her is special
that was
guest...
very flamboyant.
That was good. Special guest Jim Sullivan, aspiring author, camera... what shall we call him? Vivant? No,
Editor
not Vivant. Editor Vivant? No, it's not Savant.
Jack of all trades.
Editor Savant.
Editor Savant, Jack of all trades. To the left of Jim is Eitan Collin, co-founder, producer, and fellow Duberhead. Tonight's panel is...
All
What
this
is
is
a
my
Duberhead
fault, for which I do
exactly?
apologize.
Yes.
I don't know what a
Soundman Tim.
duberhead is. What's a duber?
Why, how come I don't do that?
We should
You should have
introduce
Michelle
Soundman
slap
Tim.
me. We should always introduce... Go ahead, slap me. Ooh, do that again. Ooh, do that again. And Soundman Tim, and of course Cameraman Frank, and our audience. Were you about to say something, or were you saying, why weren't you introducing me?
I was just saying, why weren't you introducing
Good for you, man. You get the love. It's easy to forget because I'm looking
Because
straight
my
to-
brother was wrong.
Okay, tonight's
wrong.
episode is defining steampunk. I'm going to briefly give you the Wikipedia definition, and we're going to say, is it right, is it wrong?
Because Wikipedia is always right.
It's not that it's always right, but it's
Mostly right.
Steampunk is a
Sometimes
subgenre
right.
of science fiction and speculative fiction, frequently featuring elements of fantasy that came into prominence in the 80s and 90s. The term denotes work set in an era or world where steam power is still widely used, usually the 19th century and often Victorian era Britain, but with prominent elements of either science fiction or fantasy, such as fictional technological inventions like those found in works of H.G. Wells and Jules Verne, or real technological developments like the computer occurring at an earlier date. Is that an adequate description of steampunk for our purposes? What do we add to it? What do we bring to it?
I think the best definition of steampunk I ever heard was the future that wasn't.
Interesting.
And I always like that because I think that's why so many people really like it's the future.
But there are many futures that wasn't.
No,
or
but
that
steampunk-
weren't. What is it about this future
'Cause
that
it's the-
weren't, wasn't?
because it's the future people. Oh, you go ahead.
Well, what all my friends who like steampunk, and there's a lot of them, it's where you can play with the elegance of the Victorian era, but tweak it just a little to make it fit your personality.
Soundman Tim?
Yeah, well, it's the Victorian thing is very big. It's sort of drawing inspiration from H.G. Wells, and that era of fiction, but adding new technology to it, but basing it on steam technology. So trying to get the aesthetic of the past.
It's
I think-
not just steam. It's anything clockwork.
Gears and springs.
Yeah.
Gears and springs. I think that's a very important point that you're making, Soundman Tim, the aesthetic. And I think because there have been many novels written about all sorts of different types of futures, none of them seem to have grabbed hold with as much gusto as steampunk. It won't go away, and it keeps getting bigger, including movies, soundtracks, everything. And I think why, at least on one level, this seems to have such wide appeal is because I think in the downsizing of our economy and the cost cutting of our buildings and everything that we have, all design is dying. Things are flat and vapid. Other than modern art, we're told, well, that's the epitome of beauty. When in fact, if you look at this Victorian architecture and the Victorian clothing and everything that comes out of that, it's highly imaginative, and it allows, as good science fiction does, you to imagine with it. That's where I sit on it.
It's also very sophisticated too. The clothing styles and whatnot. I think.
Yeah, no, layered and colorful and.
Well, that's just it. I think a lot of it has to do
Bold,
with the fashion aspect of it, right? Much like the goth scene, the steampunk scene is about doing something for yourself. Is about
Big brown leather coats with brass buttons that chop down straight over this
about-
way here. And
It's about you dressing up and you sort of putting on a new appearance, a new identity, and I think that's a big part of steampunk.
And by the way, getting lots of props for having created something steampunkian. In other words, half the fun when you talk to people who are dressed in steampunk outfits is they're telling you how they created it, what they did, how they put it together. And I don't think that I've seen anything else in fandom. I mean, maybe I'm missing something here. I haven't been in that long. Where there is that much of a story to tell, not just how you look. Yes, now we've dressed up and we look just like the characters in Star Wars, or we look just like the characters in this famous movie. So that's interesting. Not nearly as interesting as I've seen like steampunk. A girl showed me a steampunk telephone, and she waited for her father's phone to die because it had a round porthole cover instead of the regular square one. And once she finally got it and she activated it, she turned it into a little porthole, and it looked like a steampunkian cell phone, which was odd and very original.
It seems another major component of steampunk is the mechanics of a device are meant to be visible rather than
hidden.
With our modern technology, everything's hidden. You don't see how it works, but with steampunk, you can see little gears turning and everything.
Skeleton watch writ large.
Yeah, there's a lot of it which is about, making something not, that it's convenient and has the slick user interface, but making it so that the act of using it is interesting. You turn cranks, you do dials.
Right.
You've got more stuff to do than you need to do.
There's humor built into it, in fact. The way we saw Steampunk Ghostbusters, Eitan and I, at one of these cons. And just the showing of they mimicked everything that the Ghostbusters had, but in steampunk form. And there was tremendous humor in all that work as well, as there is in a lot of the steampunk work.
Well, when we had the costuming panel, I brought in that gun. I had made that for a steampunk inventors contest last LostCon. The one thing I didn't bring in was I actually made a device with levers and switches for actually. What happened was I bought one of those shiny glowy things that you buy at Disneyland for $5, and I put modeling paste on it to make it bigger and put attached levers and everything onto it.
Yeah,
This
it's
is
incredible.
exactly what Donnie was talking about.
Yeah.
It's
explaining how you made it.
How you made it, and it's incredibly creative. My poor vacuum cleaner guy calls me like once every 2 or 3 months and says, Donnie, I have another steampunk part for you. He doesn't really know what steampunk necessarily is. I've showed him pictures, but he knows what I'm looking for, and my kids and I have been collecting pieces for the past year so that we can put together some kind of group of steampunk guns. We're almost ready to be there. But even that, the fact that you can go collecting through things, lampshades and candles and candelabras, it's incredibly creative.
Oh, side note to the audience, to see the nifty gun that Michelle was just talking about, please watch our video on costuming on a previous episode of Never Ending Panel.
Oh, yeah, which we can't really link in the movie. We're not that sophisticated. Soundman Tim, you look like you were about to say something.
I was just going to mention that here in the greater Los Angeles area, we have copious resources for getting the pieces for your steampunk paraphernalia. I could name them all, but then we'd have to have them pay us.
Yeah,
and
we'll just
actually,
link
if
'em.
you are in other parts of the world, which you are, and you wish to get together with other people that are commenting, maybe you can figure out how to go ahead and
in the comments section,
network for
absolutely.
in the comment section network
some links.
for getting some links together so that you can actually steampunk in your own little networking areas, be it Decatur or Tokyo.
Thank you very much. And I think, unless there are any other comments, we can close up.
I think steampunk.
We're down to the last minute anyway.
I think steampunk is essentially the future that we want.
Oh, by the way, one last humorous note. There was a person this week at Baycon where Eitan and I were paneling, and she is a punk rocker who has a mohawk that goes up about, I'd say about 1.5 feet. And she had a little picture that had, she was wearing a bandana with 2 little chimneys on the bandana, and she would blow into it and steam would come out of the top of her head, and she had a sign that said Steampunk. I'll post that picture. I'll give that to Jim. Anyways, so
I refuse to dignify that.
Eitan,
with any further comment.
if you have comments, kind of thing. Whatever.
Oh, absolutely. As stated before, if you have any comments, if you feel we screwed up, messed up, left out some definition that absolutely has to be mentioned, please comment below and tell us how we were idiots.
Thank you very much.